On April the 24th, 2022, I posted two poems. This is the first one. It is number 3576, and it's called One Day Later. It starts with a quote: "When the words do not resolve, but clank and die next to each other." Cedar Saigo. And here I am. Well, no, there he is. Here we are on page one, and we're making noises with our pencils, our markers, our writing utensils. And what utility. Tonight's guest is gleaming and looks very out of place on Jimmy Kimmel. In designer jewelry. Which brings me to text. Texting is design. Textuality. This, I believe, hold on to me for just a moment, if you will. I'm not talking about fingering a phone, not that sort of texting, nor am I saying I'm not young enough to be well versed or too old to get quite a bit of what there is to get about methods of communication. There's a lot of things that I'm not saying here about pecking at little buttons, not buttons, that are in fact teeny tiny. Okay, small. Rectangles we all too often think of metaphorically as hearts, as heart-shaped hearts, whether many of them, row after row, a multitude that is, or just maybe two, maybe just one, which if you've been around perhaps as long as I have, you might make by punching out less than three, which would in fact and tautologically be, for example, two, which sadly would just as easily be one, or, and who cares if, right, could be less than zero, whose zero-headed thoughts go now to Robert Downey Jr. and the windmills to and from Palm Springs. That is less than or equal to zero. No, I mean texting, the physical act of drawing words, letter by letter upon a page, let's say. The act of writing, which I do now. I write a green sentence across this page before it is sprawled across a screen like so. A page from a book that I stole from a sidewalk some 4 or 5 years ago. Or perhaps I took it from the shelter's library, which was a tall, chewed-up-looking stained bookshelf that stood in the break room said shelter, the place I called home for a year and a half. The shelter. That library. What home has a break room? Could be the beginning of a droll joke, another line or two that now live in a notebook begun by all the evidence I have rather effortlessly gathered as somebody's diary, is someone else's private book. His first few pages still mostly filled with what appears to be the scrawled thoughts and desires of an individual who never intended to part ways with these pages, unless by some accidental chance it were to be found by one particular person, and only her. She alone might find this book lying so forlorn upon the sidewalk as it is, will be, was, in the middle of this city. A hush falls upon. The author finishes a third page of scribbled thoughts, a hush having fallen upon the city, the sidewalk, the notebook, its pages. The author of what appears on pages 1 through 3, and then a bunch of pigeons who must have been atop the roof of the building, propping up the author's very back. And pigeons, this bunch, flapping their wings all messily, moving from this roof to the rooftop of the building just across the street from this biographer, the author of this love letter. These pigeons make a lot of noise for a small amount of time. The amount of time it takes for all of them to move from one rooftop to an almost identical rooftop directly across Mission Street. Carrier pigeons, the artist writes near the bottom of the third page of the newish notebook as the hush that had enveloped the city moments before is interrupted by the bird's return. The last two words written in furious scritches and scratches in pencil, so that when the latest hush begins to blanket the day, the blips of noise the nub makes as it so feverishly ekes out this last line, tickling the parchment. Something only the author, intimate as he is with the notebook's paper, does, until the sound of a train begins to crescendo. A chugging locomotive that makes a grand entrance into the big city as if it were a star in some Technicolor Western, so that we can now think of each line scribbled across this page as a has-been, or the horizon as it is flooded with charcoal-colored smoke that, as the train chugs ever closer, gets blown thick black puffs of smoke that spew gloriously from the choo-choo chugging train's swiftly approaching, nearer, ever nearer, front-end engine.